50th Anniversary of Apollo 13 Avoiding Disaster by Learn With News, Level 3. April 2020 marks the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 13 mission to land on the Moon. The mission, which was the third to try and land on the Moon, launched on April 11, 1970, 9 months after Apollo 11 and 5 months after Apollo 12. Apollo 11, the first mission to land on the Moon, was watched by an estimated 650 million people around the world. For reference, the population of the world was 3.6 billion at the time. By the time Apollo 13 launched, people had grown disinterested in space travel and humans going to the Moon. Many people saw it as routine, and people thought that going to the Moon would be a regular occurrence in the near future. The lack of interest in space travel at the time was evidenced by the fact that none of the American TV networks showed the planned TV broadcast from Apollo 13. The astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Haise thought they were broadcasting live to the world when in fact only their families and colleagues were able to watch. Approximately 6 minutes after the end of the TV broadcast, lunar module pilot Fred Haise was running tests on the lunar module when the crew heard a pretty large bang, along with malfunctions in the ship. 26 seconds after the accident, Swigert and Lovell radioed NASA with the now famous phrase, "Houston, we've had a problem." The crew quickly realized the severity of the problem. One of the oxygen tanks was completely empty, and the second tank was slowly losing oxygen. At the same time, Captain Lovell noticed a gas of some sort leaking from the ship into space. The crisis worsened as the crew had to transfer to the lunar lander in order to use it as a lifeboat. The only option for NASA and Apollo 13 was to try and help the astronauts survive long enough to make it back to Earth. Apollo 13 had little oxygen, water, power, and was traveling towards the Moon with no way of turning right back around to Earth. The only option was to try and travel around the Moon and back to Earth. Looping around the Moon was just one of many challenges that the astronauts would face. Normally, astronauts would use the flight computer to help guide them around the Moon, but the computer wouldn't work. This meant they had to manually fly the ship, something that is incredibly dangerous and easy to get wrong. This was just one of the many ways in which the crew could have died had they got it wrong. They used the position of the Moon and the Sun to guide them, and they travelled for over 4 minutes to get on a path around the Moon and back to Earth. Thanks to the skill of the crew, they executed the maneuver almost perfectly. On the way back to Earth, the challenges were far from over. Without heating, due to the batteries being turned off to save power, the temperature in the ship dropped to 3 degrees Celsius. The crew had just 200 milliliters of water each day, and the ship was filling with poisonous carbon dioxide. The crew had to build an oxygen filter out of plastic, tape, paper, and other items they had available. The crew had to do 2 more manual maneuvers when getting close to the Earth in order to fix their position correctly. Any slight error in their position would cause them to miss Earth or die on re-entry. They then had to separate the lunar lander, the ship that had kept them alive, from their command module that was designed for their return to Earth. On April 17, 1970, Apollo 13 returned safely to Earth. The near disaster had captured the attention of the world once again, and in 1995 the movie Apollo 13, starring Tom Hanks, was released. NASA has been celebrating the miraculous recovery of the ship with special websites and information about the mission. Jim Lovell and Fred Haise, the 2 astronauts who should have walked on the Moon, are still alive today.